In 1999, a man named Garrett McCullough disappears. In 2003, a young lady makes a startling confession. 3 years later, she herself disappears from Dent, Missouri. Everyone knows what happened, but nobody can prove it. You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and tonight we bring you the case of Lena Chapin.
This was just a couple of days before Lena went missing. She was like, I look so horrible. I'm like, no, you don't. But thanks for taking the picture with me. She looks beautiful. I mean, she had no makeup on. She was just Lena. Obviously, I would have known what my mom was capable of doing. I miss her. I miss her so much. It kills me.
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, crippled basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia. So I didn't get into a lot of detail on our socials, but the natives were a little restless when I posted last night that we would be delayed in releasing an episode this week.
I know, man. That's got to make you feel good, though, that people are actually upset that you, Arlo, fucked up their Tuesday morning.
I sure
while
did.
I just had to sit here and,
flick the bean.
Watch them
get mad.
Have their Tuesday ruined.
So,
I was going to call this, the Just Can't Prove first episode of the Just Can't Prove It Brews. But I guess we're going to call it the, my back hurts, so I'm a poor little baby brews.
So let me explain something to you.
No, do you know how bad my back hurts every day from jiu-jitsu? I walked into this room like a crippled man, like an 85-year-old man.
Well, maybe I need to start taking jiu-jitsu.
Huh?
Maybe I need to start participating in jiu-jitsu because I literally, if you sat in front of your couch, or if you just stood in front of your couch and then flopped down, that's how far I fell. And when it happened, I didn't think nothing about it because, I didn't hit a rock. The ground was soft, nothing. And then the next morning, buddy, I could not move. Couldn't breathe deep. It was awful. Now it's in my hips. I guess I had overcompensated and I rolled my hips. So now my psoas muscle is as tight as a banjo string.
What?
My psoas.
You made that word up.
It's like the P in pneumonia. It's kind of silent. It's PSOAS. But anyway, no, with the threat of divorce, if I did not go to the doctor, I hobbled my rear end into an urgent care and basically was told that I was too old to be doing yard work. And so that's got to hurt right there. Muscle relaxers and 500 milligrams of Aleve. Later, I can now work. And so, but yeah, it does. Wait till you turn 40 and you lose an inch on your height.
Oh, bro, I don't do yard work, man. That's the thing.
Well, I've got a 17-year-old that's just inherited every bit of hours for at least this season.
Oh, yeah. Dude, the 17. I remember seeing 2 weeks ago, we was playing trivia with an 11-year-old.
Better yet, we were bribing a 7 or 8-year-old to go run the answers downstairs.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Many a free beer were had. Those were good times. Good times. All right, so let's get this underway. Lena Chapin, or Chapin, was born.
It's Chapin, bro.
Chapin. God. Was born Lena May Chapin on August 29th, 1985, but had no use for that complicated spelling of her name and preferred to go by Lena. And she was the second oldest of 6 girls. Now, let's pause here. We have to tell you a story to get to a story.
Jesus, man, was this an Oliver Stone movie?
Yeah, it is. But it's going to tie in a lot better than he did in Full Metal Jacket. I can guarantee you that.
Full Metal Jacket is the tale of two movies, man. That's got to be the best first half of a movie almost ever. And then the second half is just dog shit.
Yep. Except I Love You Long Time. That's the only part of the second part.
Oh, as soon as that part's over, I turn the movie out.
Yeah.
He said it might be some pure Alabama black snack, but it definitely ain't no too damn buku.
Oh, so her mother, Lena's, was named Sandy, and her last name changed as fast as the weather in the Southeast. Now, Sandy never drank, smoked, or did any extracurricular drugs. However, her drug of choice was the married man. She would use her gift of gab and her sex appeal to swoon most any man. Now, I could not find much about Sandy's early life, but she would have her first child, Brandy, at the age of 16 and took the father's last name, Peterson.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, do tell. Sandy would then marry Robert Chapin, Lena's biological father. She would leave Robert and marry his brother, Richard Chapin. Hold on to that nugget. That might come back. Sandy would have another daughter, Robin, and her father was either Robert Chapin or Richard Chapin. This is before 23andMe. The other daughters were Jean, Rachel, and Rosie. Now, Lena is described by her oldest sister, Brandy, as a mouthy, headstrong young lady. She was always spunky and did not mix her words. She was also the ruler of the roost when it came to the other sisters. She made sure that they did their chores and their schoolwork, and she was the glue that held all the girls together. Now, Brandy would describe her and her sister's childhood as poor. Sandy always provided and worked hard to make sure that they had food, clothes, and a house to call home. Brandy describes her mother as a fun-loving mom who always made sure her children did not go without. She went on to state that only bad childhood memory was how many times Sandy would just come home and tell the girls they were moving again. Sandy loved men, and when she became infatuated with one, she would use her sex appeal to sway the men into her orbit to allow her to move in with the man along with her 6 daughters. Once the new wore off, Sandy would say,
"Wow, like 6, move in with 6 daughters."
And at the time, I think they were all under the age of 11 or 12.
She definitely had to be,
Fertile Myrtle?
No, I'm saying persuasive or, very seductive to be able to have multiple men take on that kind of responsibility.
Yes, and that's the underlying current.
6 daughters, that's 7 women in a household, and you're the only man?
Swimming in a sea of estrogen.
Oh, boy. You don't want to be there.
Nope. Not at all. Now, once she grew tiresome of the new man, she would set her sights on another man and the cycle would start over again. Children were always moving in with Sandy's newest, quote, boyfriend, and Sandy would always tell the girls to lie to the current husband or boyfriend when she did not come home on the regular. Sandy would change boyfriends or husbands roughly every 2 to 3 years. Now, Sandy began a relationship with Albert McCullough, and yes, he first started seeing Sandy when he was married. Albert and his wife would divorce in 1993, and within weeks, Sandy and the girls would move in with him. Albert and Sandy would wed in 1994, and Albert stated that Sandy was quite the charmer and knew all the right things to say. He said she could talk her way into and out of just about anything. Now, Brandy was 10 when Sandy moved the girls in with Albert and said that Albert was a very good stepfather to her and her sisters. Sandy was going to school to become a nurse and was not home when the girls would get home from school. So Albert took over and raised the girls like they were his own. Brandy said Albert spoiled the girls, and they were always doing something. He would sign the girls up for gymnastics, aerobics, or just about any sport that was in season. He would take the girls to the river during the warmer months, and he taught them how to fish and to swim. Now, Albert stated that things were great for a couple of years, and then he figured out that Sandy was not always at school. He said he knew that Sandy was cheating on him, but he just did not know who with. That is until Brandy and Lena felt sorry for how Sandy was treating Albert and confessed to him that she was off with his brother, Gary.
Dang.
Yeah. She's got a thing for brothers. So Albert said he confronted Gary one day down near the river that wound through the family's farm and, quote, he beat the mess out of me, I beat the mess out of him. Albert and Gary eventually stopped fighting only after Sandy came up and hit Albert across the back with a large stick. Albert stated that she, quote, knocked the wind out of me. I knew then and there was no way she was coming back home with me. Albert and Sandy divorced in 1996. Albert said that he tried to warn Gary that Sandy was, quote, bad news, but that Gary was like a lovesick puppy and did not want to hear what Albert had to say. So Sandy leaves Albert's home in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and moves the girls to Cassville, Missouri, and in with Gary. Now, Cassville and Fayetteville are approximately an hour apart, with Cassville being just over the Missouri-Arkansas line. Sandy and Gary would marry in 96, just weeks after her divorce from Albert was final. Now, Gary owned a farm in Cassville, and all the girls learned to do chores on the farm along with maintaining the farm. Now, Gary worked for George's, which is a company that maintained local chicken houses as well as a couple of processing plants. Gary was like Albert and took all the girls to raise as if they were his own. And at first, the girls despised doing farm chores, but soon came to expect them just as most kids do. Gary would never give the girls more chores than they were capable of doing, and he would take care of them once they had completed, and he would reward them by taking them into town for ice cream. Lena's oldest sister, Brandy, stated that Gary taught the girls how to be independent and self-disciplined, something she will always be grateful for. Sandy, on the other hand, she would sink her claws into Gary just as she had his brother Albert and the other two previous men she was married to. She worked at separating Gary from his family and friends, and when she had that accomplished, she would get bored and look for a new man to cast her wicked ways upon. She grew bored with Gary, and just like she had done so many times before, she started cheating on him. Her next love interest, was Mr. Chris Klemp. And that is Chris with a K and Klemp with a K. So he's KK.
My question is how this all could go on. How could she could do this to so many people for so long without, developing a reputation for doing that sort of thing? You know what I'm trying to say?
You ever watch?
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not judging by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying.
You ever watch Harlem Nights?
You gonna get us in trouble for anybody that recognizes that reference, because I'm not saying it.
I ain't either, but I wish I had that sound clip preloaded because I'd play Red Fox.
Let's just say Red Fox makes a good point in that movie.
A very damn good point.
Wait, no, it ain't Red Fox. It's Della Reese.
No. Yeah, well, him and Della Reese get into it, but they ask why, and then Della Reese.
Richard Pryor says, I don't want to meet her. Red Fox says, I do.
What about that part when she comes in there and Quick's trying to apologize to her and she's bitching about Red Fox? Now, who leaves one swallow of orange juice in the damn bottle?
You swallow it, bitch. Oh, such an underrated movie. If you haven't seen it, go out of your way. Harlem Nights, Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor.
You'll be a nine-toe walking around hoe in this town.
You got to be the nine-toe having this bitch in Harlem. Oh, you gonna shoot me in my pinky toe.
I'm gonna shoot that crusty little monkey off.
Oh, man, I hope everybody's seen that movie.
Me too, because if not, you need to. All right, so where were we? Oh, Chris Klemp. Okay, back to reality. Her affair with Chris would begin sometime in March of 1999. Chris was 10 years Sandy's junior, and what made him even more of a target was that Chris's family had some moolah. Sandy would learn that the Klemps not only had wealth, but they owned a lot of property and garnered influence in the town. Lena's younger sister, Robin, would remember the day all the girls met Chris. She said that she remembers looking at Chris and thinking, quote, "Oh, Gary is going to beat the crap out of this guy when he finds out," end quote. Well, Gary soon figured out that Sandy was more than likely messing around on him, and it all came to a head when, out of the blue, Gary was arrested for writing bad checks to several businesses around a small town just over the Arkansas state line. The account that the checks were written from was an account that Gary had not used in several years. Gary puts two and two together and realizes that Sandy had access to his financial records and must have found the old checkbook and thought that there was money in the account. Another blow came when Gary found out that not only had Sandy wrote the bad checks, but she had also not made the payments on the farm for several months. He was just days away from having his farm foreclosed on when he was arrested.
But hey, let me tell you something about check forging stuff. I watched the document. This is totally off subject, but I watched a documentary on HBO called Gladiator Days. And they show this nerd. He looks like, glasses, clean cut, white collar. He gets arrested for forging checks, and they give him like 2 years or something like that because he stole the checkbook of the wife of the sheriff in the town. Yeah. Well, they go to interview him, and he's serving 2 consecutive life sentences for murders he committed while in prison. And they cut to him, and he's got a mohawk with tattoos all over his head, and his tongue is forked. And they're like, "What the heck happened, man? How did this happen to you?" And he said, "Let me explain something to you." He said, "They didn't send me to fucking check forgers prison. I'm in a federal penitentiary." He said, "My first cellmate was in here for raping and killing a child."
Surprise,
basically.
Motherfucker.
Yeah. And he said, and one night he tried to take something from me that I didn't want to give him, so I killed him.
Damn.
And then he was involved in a riot where they pinned down this guy and stabbed him like 80-something times and killed him. So, yeah. Don't go to prison, people. Forging checks ain't worth it.
He didn't get Club Med.
No. It's Club Fed, by the way.
Yeah, well, it is true, Club Fed. I apologize for the misquoting. Now, according to the Monette Times newspaper, Gary caught Sandy and Chris in a parked truck doing the nasty.
Nice.
Done dirt cheap. Gary chose not to beat the shit out of Chris at the moment, probably because of all the legal trouble he was in trying to get out of with the bad checks, and figured that if he beat the hell out of somebody, it's going to be hard for him to say that he's just an innocent man and she's a wench.
Yeah, that would put a little damper on your defense.
Yeah. He would confide in a friend that he was going to have to file for divorce from Sandy. He told that same friend that he needed him to keep his shotgun because he was scared of Sandy. Gary would elaborate that Sandy and him had gotten into an argument one evening, and she grabbed the gun and stuck it in his belly and pulled the trigger. Gary stated that the only thing that saved his life was that he always kept his guns unloaded. The friend told Gary that he did not mind holding on to the gun for him. But as Gary is leaving the friend's house, the guy pops open the single-shot 12-gauge and the shell's in the breech. He stops Gary and he says, "Hey," quote, "I thought you said you kept your guns unloaded." Gary said, "I do." Friend replies, "Well, there's a shell in this one, hotshot." And the friend tries to remove the shell, and it will not come out. It's stuck. So the old boy grabs a pair of pliers and pulls the shell out, and when he does, powder from the shell starts pouring from the end of it. The friend says that Gary turned white as a ghost. He tells his friend, quote, "If that shell had not been a dud, she would have blown me in half that night."
Dang.
Yeah. Gary began moving things out of his house and told his boss at George's Chicken Processing not to give his check to Sandy under any circumstances. And he doubles down on any circumstances and says if the bitch produces a note that states I gave her permission, that note's forged and it's not my handwriting. So he maybe needed to call Albert and say, "Hey, bro, wish I'd have listened to you." But it's the most powerful thing on the planet.
You're damn right about that.
Now, it has been rumored that Sandy talked with several of her coworkers about how she could murder Gary and get away with it. An unnamed coworker stated that she would even talk about several ways to dispose of a body and the body never be found. One coworker stated that she grew tired of the macabre talk and told Sandy to just divorce Gary. She said that Sandy had this deadpan stare and said, quote, "I will not give him a dime of my money," end quote. Now, sidebar, what money do you have, hotshot? I mean, your kids have grown up poor most of their lives. You're going back to school to be a nurse. This old boy is basically raising your children and providing them with food and shelter, and you just coming and going as you please. What money is it that are you just swimming in coins like Scrooge McDuck, or am I missing something here? But anyway, so we get to May 11th, 1999. And that day, Gary does not show up for work. His boss calls his house, and Sandy tells him that Gary left to go buy some fighting roosters from a guy in Diamond, but he has not come home. Gary's boss and his fellow employees know immediately that something is up. Gary was a hard worker, and he never missed work. Word eventually gets around to Barry County Sheriff Mike Epperly, and it just so happened that on May 13th, 1999, 2 cows were reported wandering the road near Gary's farm. So Sheriff Epperly and fellow deputy, they get the cows rounded up and are walking them back to the pasture when a pickup comes barreling down the road, screeching to a halt. Sandy and a couple of the girls are in the truck. Sandy gets out and asks them, quote, "What the hell are y'all doing on my property?" End quote. They explain that the cows were out and they were just putting them back in the pasture for Gary. She then says, quote, "Well, I guess while you're here, I should go ahead and report Gary missing," end quote. Sheriff Epperly says that Sandy told the same story she had told Gary's boss at George's, which was that Gary left home 2 days earlier on May 11th, 1999, to go buy a fighting rooster from a Mexican in the nearby town of Diamond. But he never came back. Quote, "The further we got into that, the more we didn't believe it," Sheriff Epperly said. "I think that was a made-up story." And if you watch the reboot Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, this is episode 6 that this story is covered.
Oh, now that's my recommendation. You can't be spoiling that, right?
It can still be your recommendation, but I want everybody to watch it. A number of locals would come forward alleging there was more to the situation than what Sandy was stating to authorities. When contacted by investigators in Barry County, Stephen Turner said an acquaintance of his, Chris Klemp, was having an affair with Sandy and offered to pay him if he would kill her current husband, that being Gary McCullough. This has been published in several newspapers, and even Sheriff Epperly confirmed talking to the acquaintance who gave him the same story. Now, most everything that we will discuss moving forward comes with an asterisk that says that Sheriff Epperly has confirmed such stories. I just feel like that we need to get that out of the way so I don't have to keep saying it. So 3 days after Gary's reported missing, Chris is interviewed by deputies. Chris denied having an affair and the murder for hire allegations. He did, however, admit that he and Sandy were in a physical relationship. So how do you deny having an affair but admit that you're doing the horizontal hokey pokey?
It's complicated.
Obviously. He, in fact, told Sheriff Epperly that a week after Gary disappeared, he had moved in to Gary's house with Sandy. So Sheriff Epperly says, quote, "He, Chris, was there living with them while we were working the case. He moved right in." That's another flag. If Gary was coming back, he wouldn't have been there because he would have known he was getting his butt kicked. So that's another indication we have a homicide on our hands. End quote.
Ruh-roh.
At the time of Gary's disappearance, Sandy was 32 and Chris was 22. Lena's sister Brandy stated that, quote, "I was only 13 years old at the time, but even then I knew what Chris was to my mom. I remember Mom coming home from work one day saying she had met this cute guy. She was nervous about him finding out she had 6 kids, so the first time I met Chris, my mom made me act like I was one of her co-workers and not one of her daughters." Really? Mom would lie to Chris. She told him she was pregnant with his baby and that Gary was beating her, neither of which was true. You have to understand, she is a manipulator. Mom is really good at getting what she wants from men. It was never about money. It was always about the challenge of getting her man, even if they were married. She always got her way. But once he was hers, she'd get something on the side and move on to the next challenge. End quote. On the same day that Chris was first interviewed by law enforcement about Gary's disappearance, his current wife, Jennifer Bratton Klemp, told the sheriff's office that Sandy had telephoned her prior to Gary's disappearance, claiming she was pregnant with Chris's baby. Soon to be ex-Mrs. Klemp said when she confronted Chris about it, he said, quote, "I ain't got no time to deal with her because he had to deal with killing a man."
Wow.
Yeah. The last statement would come out in the Barry County Advertiser newspaper several years later during another incident. Ex-Mrs. Klemp would go on to claim that on the night Gary disappeared, she picked Chris up outside the McCullough property in the early morning hours and that he had a gun with him at the time. So let's just take a gander at Jennifer Bratton Klemp for a second. So you got a woman you don't know, calls you on the telephone, tells you she's pregnant with your husband's baby, and then your husband calls you in the wee hours of the morning to come pick him up off some dirt road near a farm, and when he emerges from the darkness, he's carrying a gun, and you didn't think about, maybe I need to get the fuck out of there?
I know I would.
I know about a 5'11" dark-headed woman that wouldn't have come and gotten him. This just gets more convoluted the further we get into it, Coach. Now, Jeff and Nikki Allen, friends of Gary's, came forward to claim he was actively moving items into their home because his marriage with Sandy was falling apart. They told authorities that Gary wanted to split up with Sandy after finding her and Chris in the parked truck doing the old dirty deed, done dirt cheap. The Allens further alleged Sandy attacked Nikki at the Allens' property during a confrontation connected to the marital problems between her and Gary. Sandy ultimately pled guilty to an assault charge for striking Nikki, according to the Barry County Sheriff's reports. May 16, 1999, Gary's truck was discovered parked and abandoned on a dead-end road in Barry County, 5 days after his disappearance. Sandy signed a consent search form for the family property, but investigators did not discover enough physical evidence of foul play to warrant charges being levied. Sheriff Epperly would ask Sandy while the search warrant was being executed if she would mind taking a polygraph test. Quote, "She looked me straight in the eye and she said, 'Take a polygraph? If a body is ever discovered, I'll take your polygraph,'" end quote. Cold-hearted wench.
Yeah, that's some ice cold water running through those veins, man. But she had a point. Like we've said it many times. Don't ever take a polygraph.
Oh, I'm not faulting her for not taking a polygraph. I'm just saying that this woman, while she's not physically got a set on her, figuratively she's got a set on her that are made from brass. Because she is one ballsy lady.
Yeah, I don't care if they catch me with the body. I don't care if they catch me with a body in my hands. I'm not taking a polygraph.
Agreed. Agreed. Now, the investigation into Gary's disappearance continued, but murder charges were never filed against Sandy or Chris. Sheriff Epperly stated that there's a big difference in knowing who committed a murder and proving who committed a murder. Quote, "We felt you have to have more than circumstantial evidence to file a criminal case. There was no body or murder weapon found. We hoped that one day this case was going to come out by the children talking. I thought that was what was going to happen with Lena. I went to interview a former roommate of hers in Green Forest, Arkansas, hoping maybe she'd said something to her. Somehow Lena found out that and came to the police station, cussing me up one side and down the other. At that point, I knew she knew a lot about what happened and that it was eating her from the inside out," end quote. The only charge Sandy faced in connection to Gary's disappearance was for illegally selling Gary's mortgaged cattle immediately after his disappearance, but those charges were eventually dropped. Less than a year after Gary's disappearance, on April the 11th of the year 2000, Sandy was granted dissolution of marriage from Gary after he failed to show up to the divorce hearing. I mean, that's convenient. You divorce a man you know you killed, knowing they ain't going to find his body. Allegedly killed, I should say. Allegedly.
Yeah. You don't want to get sued, bro.
No, that she allegedly. Me reiterate that.
I mean, the man's missing. He's not dead.
Yeah, he
Can't
just.
prove.
I mean, he wrote all them bad checks. What y'all gonna think? He's gonna show up? No, he ain't showing up. He was beating on me. Anyway, with all the trouble facing the dynamic duo of Sandy and Chris in Berry County, the couple decided to relocate the family to Dent County to get married and start a new life. They chose Sligo, Missouri, a near ghost town in the county's northeast corner, which a century before had thrived as the home of the Sligo Furnace Company. But by the 21st century, the town was largely abandoned, filled with ruined buildings and bordered with the burned black obsidian slag piles of its old blast furnace. It's a great place to settle down with your new family, obviously, you know. But Gary McCullough was officially declared dead on March 1st, 2005, at the request of his surviving family members. Now, a young man named Joshua Delmain, a neighbor and friend who regularly drove Lena to school, remembers, quote, "It wasn't ever a mystery about what happened to Gary when I was around Lena and her sisters away from her mother. I remember I was hanging out with them at the caboose." Yep, an old abandoned caboose of the Frisco Railroad, which was on the Klemp property. One time, and her sisters showed me the newspaper clippings about how Chris and Sandy killed their dad, and I was just like, whoa. They were like, "We just told you my mom and Chris killed someone, and all you can say is, whoa?" Lena then came in and saw what they were doing and was furious to the point that this young man thought they were going to fight. It was after that everything calmed back down, and she told Joshua that her parents didn't know the other sisters had the clippings and that he better not say anything about it. Now, Lena's sister Brandy says Lena confessed to her about knowing how Gary was murdered. Quote, "One night after I came back from being in a foster home for a half a year, Lena and I were hanging out together and catching up at the house in Sligo. We were having a conversation, and then she broke down and started crying." Brandy said one day the girls get off the school bus and Sandy meets them at the door and tells them that they cannot come in the house and that they must stay outside until she tells them to. Sandy then tells Lena to come in and help her with something. Brandy remembers that she and her sisters had to do their farm chores. She needed her boots to do her chores and remembers beating on the door asking to come in and her mom yelling at her no. Brandy said that she finally gets pissed off enough that she just walks into the mudroom at the back of the house to get her boots, and she sees Sandy on all fours with her hair pulled back, scrubbing the kitchen floor with what smelled like bleach water. She says that Sandy just looked at her and went back to scrubbing. She said the fact that she remembers it so vividly is because Sandy never wore her hair back. It was always down and fixed to a T. Brandy also said that Lena told her Sandy confessed to killing Gary. On May 11, 1999, when the rest of the sisters were told to stay outside, Sandy shows Lena the body. Now, this is where, depending on what you read, she either showed her the body, or if you watch certain shows or YouTube videos, she doesn't show her the body, but Lena sees the body. Either way, Lena sees the body. She then forced Lena to help clean up the crime scene, including, according to several reports, cutting up Gary's body and burning it on a brush pile. Quote, "After she told me, she made me pinky swear to never tell anyone. A couple days later, I was trying to get a ride from my mom and Chris when they were going to St. Louis, but my mom kept saying no. I got really mad, so I said, 'You're going to take me or I'm going to tell the police what you did to Gary.' Lena heard that from the other room and came in with a red face and shoved me into a mirror. I'd never seen her so mad. Brandy said that she cut her finger deep on a broken shard of glass and asked to be taken to the hospital. She still has a scar on her little finger from the altercation. Brandy told the Salem News that, quote, "I got in the bed of the truck and Chris and Mom started driving me to the hospital. We left in the truck to go, but all of a sudden, we don't take a right into Salem, but we went left down Highway Double T and down a gravel road. I started pounding on the back of the glass saying we're going the wrong way. All of a sudden, we stop and the dome light goes on. Chris gets out of the driver's seat and he gets a double-barrel shotgun from behind the seat. So I jumped over the opposite side of the bed, and we start playing cat and mouse around the truck, and I'm screaming for my life. Then the radio starts blaring. It's up so loud it's vibrating the windows. I didn't know if I should run. I didn't know the area, and I didn't want to give Chris a clear shot. So then, all of a sudden, I think if Mom's door is unlocked, I can get to her, and sure enough, it was, and I got in, and I grabbed onto her tight. I said, Mom, please don't let him kill me. I won't tell anyone, please. She just stared straight ahead for what Brandy estimates is like 10 or 20 seconds. And finally she says, don't hurt my baby. Don't worry, we were just trying to scare you, end quote. Again, cold ice water. Allegedly, you've killed your ex-husband. And allegedly, according to your oldest daughter, your new husband has just pointed a double-barreled shotgun at her.
That's going to put a strain on any relationship.
I don't think somebody's getting invited to Christmas. Call me crazy. Now, Brandy recalls driving home, still holding on to Sandy, and when they got home, Sandy forced Chris to apologize, and they all shared a group hug. Quote, she grabbed us and said, we're okay now, right? After that night, Brandy said she never went home again and tried to stay close with Lena. Quote, Lena and I would both joke about it with one another, saying, you better watch out or Mom will get you. But she would say Mom wouldn't do that to me. She never touched me. Up to that point, Mom had always been all about us kids and keeping us together. I never thought she would be capable of actually killing one of us. But then Lena went missing. One summer night in June 2003, Gary McCullough's brother, Albert, says Lena arrived at his home outside of Carr Lane just south of Table Rock Lake. He had not seen Lena since she was 11 or 12. Now she's 17 and all grown up, and Albert could tell she was under some incredible stress. Quote, she was shaking. She was so nervous, Albert said. The whole time she was talking to me, she was on the couch and couldn't sit straight the whole time, end quote. Albert recalls, I loved those girls like they were my own. Growing up, Lena was always loyal to Sandy, and Sandy rewarded her for that. She'd always be the first one chosen to go to the store and things like that. Lena was always the one who kept Sandy's secrets for her. When I asked those girls if it were true that Sandy and my brother were fooling around together, it was Lena that was doing all the talking, trying to make up excuses for Sandy. That summer night, Lena showed up to his house was different, Albert stated. Lena would go on to tell Albert she knew the truth about what happened to his brother Gary. Now, Albert would state that he had just bought a new pocket recorder and knew he had to get whatever Lena was going to tell him on tape. And Albert recorded it without Lena's knowledge, and a copy still exists today at the Barry County Sheriff's Office. And on the tape, you can hear Albert say, well, who? Who killed Gary? Lena can be heard saying, Mom. And it's a little faint, and the recording's out there on some YouTube channels, and it's a whole tape is played on the Unsolved Mysteries episode. So if you want to listen to it, you're more than welcome to. I just felt like cutting through.
Well, I more than recommend watching that episode.
I know you're going to more than recommend it.
If you give me a damn chance.
But I do say, sir, it would be 3.5 minutes. Then I mean, it ain't the Sasquatch sounds.
No. Yeah, I mean, 3.5 minutes. That's a long time. So yeah, if you're that interested, somebody might recommend a good episode to watch.
Maybe later. On the tape, Lena goes on and states she and her sisters arrived home from school May 11th, 1999, to find their mother waiting for them at the bus stop. Lena says Sandy sent her sisters to do chores at the family's barn and brought her inside where Gary's body was sprawled out on the bedroom floor. Quote, Sandy was crying and all she wanted to say was, I can't believe this happened. I can't believe this happened, Lena said in the recording. And that's all she'd say the whole time when she was freaking out and telling me she was bawling and saying, I can't believe this happened. And I asked her, I'm like, I want to see. I didn't believe it. You know, when you think to yourself, okay, there's a dead person in your house, you know, you're not thinking, okay, come on now, whatever. It's just like, I want to see. She wouldn't let me see. She had her door locked. I said, I want to see. I want to see it right now. I know if I hadn't seen the whole thing, I would have flipped out. But there's there was a crack in the door, and I looked and I saw it, and I completely went crazy. I started spazzing out on her, and I went, what the hell happened? What happened? You know. Lena tells Albert she believes Sandy shot Gary while he sat on the living room couch eating a plate of scrambled eggs. Lena went on to say she then helped her mother methodically clean up the murder scene over the course of 2 days while her sisters went to school. Lena said they pulled up carpets, bleached the floors, and that Gary's body was burned on top of a brush pile. Now, school records obtained by law enforcement do indicate that Lena was not in school May 12th and left school early on May 13th. Quote, if you want something of Gary's to stick in the ground, there's nothing left, Lena is heard saying on the recording. He was burned, completely burned, and everything. Everything that was, left at the burn pile was put in buckets and spread all over. So I don't remember where they're at. I was there. I'm the only one that knows. I'm the only one that knows exactly what happened, but there is nothing left. There is nothing left. I burned my fingers. I burned a few of my fingers picking up ashes and bones. Now, during her conversation with Albert, she explains why she participated. Quote, the whole thing could make me sound like a bad person, but what was I supposed to do? I would have never done it, but then I was thinking, I got these sisters, and if I'm going to get caught, I better help Mom with it. Now, I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to my mom because she's got those kids, and she takes very good care of them. But I do have a little bit against her because she doesn't. I don't have a mom anymore, Lena goes on to explain that keeping this secret for 4 years has had a traumatizing effect on her. Quote, at nighttime it cost me sleep. I just wasn't myself after that. I had trouble eating. I had trouble going to my room to sleep. They didn't know why. I sat there thinking to myself, God, if they only knew. I think I'm already going crazy, and I think I've already gone crazy over this. It's just drove me insane. End quote. Lena tells Albert she was confessing to him because his family had treated her and her sisters so great, and she knew they were suffering from not knowing what had happened to Gary.
The guilt of that she was experiencing had to be tremendous,
Yeah, I can't believe at that age, too, she was, 13 or 14?
If it happened, but I don't know.
Yeah.
All signs are pointing towards that it did,
Yeah, a lot of signs are. After recording the conversation, Albert contacted the Barry County Sheriff's Office and turned the evidence over to them. Quote, it looked like we had something really concrete and solid to work on, Sheriff Epperly said. Lena told Albert a lot of things that I believe to be the truth. So Sheriff Epperly contacts Lena and asks her to come in to elaborate on her confession. Lena agrees, but the next day, a lawyer hired by Sandy intervenes and, quote, convinces Lena to exercise her right to remain silent. Sheriff Epperly would say, quote, she lawyered up. Although we have a copy of her confession to Albert, we never got to speak with her. The family's lawyer would not allow it. There is no record of her recanting her confession that I'm aware of, end quote. On June 26, 2006, April Chandler and Joy McCullough, Gary's daughters from a previous marriage, filed a wrongful death suit in Barry County Civil Court against both Sandy and Chris Klemp, who were then living in Dent County. The suit alleged the duo knowingly took the life of Gary. The McCullough daughters' litigation was predicated in part on Lena's taped confession to Albert. Lena was initially listed in the suit as a co-conspirator in the crime. Quote, we were very interested in contacting Lena because she had confessed to taking an active role in the cover-up of Gary's murder. According to the McCullough's lawyer, Richard Lee Anderson, he goes on to state that, quote, the statements of a co-conspirator can be used against other conspirators in the crime. We hoped if we could get Lena, with her own words, under oath, we could finally get what happened to Gary on the record, end quote. Now, on July 7, 2006, Dent County Sheriff's deputies served Sandy and Chris with court papers for the civil suit. But when the deputies asked where Lena was, Sandy said that Lena, who was then 20, just up and moved to Florida with a boyfriend earlier that year.
Yeah, just up and moved. Didn't tell nobody. Just gone. Didn't take her stuff.
They didn't take anything. Now, 2 months later, on September 15, 2006, Sandy claimed that a masked figure in camouflage assaulted her outside her home, according to a report obtained from the Dent County Sheriff's Office. Sandy said she believed the attacker was the missing Gary McCullough, who she said was, quote, not missing, only hiding, end quote. The investigative deputy noted that Sandy had bruises on her face, but that no footprints were evident in the dew on the grass in the area in which she claimed the assailant ran away, nor in the sand of the home's driveway. Barry County law enforcement was contacted, but they assured Dent County law enforcement that whoever it wasn't Gary. The investigating deputy attached a copy of the wrongful death lawsuit summons to the report. Keep in mind, while the civil case is going on, Lena has still not been reported missing. Quote, I first heard Lena was missing when I bumped into one of her sisters in town, and she told me Lena had left a month prior and never came home to get all of her things, former neighbor and friend E.J. Schulke of the Sligo area told the Salem News. He goes on to state, quote, last time I talked with Lena was only 1 month before she disappeared. We talked for a couple of hours, and she said she was saving up money and hoping to move to St. Louis. Lena's younger sister, Jenny Decker of Salem, agrees Lena had hopes of starting over in St. Louis. Quote, before she came up missing, she planned on taking her son Coulter and moving to Arkansas. She had gotten around the wrong crowd and was using drugs. She wanted to get away from that scene and start fresh. She disappeared before she could do that. Lena's older sister, Brandy, remembers being skeptical of the Florida story the first time she heard it. Quote, there's no way Lena would have left her son Coulter behind. Lena loved Coulter more than anything. There is a scrapbook, there's another scrapbook, and another scrapbook, which proves it. She also wouldn't have given Mom the satisfaction of getting Coulter. Mom and Lena were always fighting over him. Mom would go to Country Mart in Salem and show him off and say he was hers. And Lena would be like, stop saying that, Mom, he's mine. One time, Lena and I, Brandy, were going to take Coulter to see his father in Arkansas, and Mom called us flipping out saying, quote, you bring him home right now, or I'm going to kill myself, end quote.
Jeebus.
Yeah. Brandy stated that Sandy and Lena were always fighting over legal guardianship for Coulter, which Lena would not concede to Sandy. Why the hell would she? And why?
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Short of someone trying to prove that she was an unfit mother because of her drug use or partying, why would you sign guardianship over? But anyway, hell, she was 20 years old at the time, and Sandy had had Brandy when she was, 16?
I believe so, yeah.
So, hell. Anyway, Brandy said that Sandy also insisted Coulter call her Mom, which pissed Lena off even more, which it would me too. Now, Rachel Bryce of Salem, a friend and coworker of Lena's, said she also didn't believe the Florida story either. Lena told me her mom would get Coulter over her dead body. Those were the words she used. Her mom knew I didn't buy the story about Lena running off. She was afraid of me because she knew I knew all the crazy stuff going on in that house. Lena and I were good friends, and she would have me over, and I'd see all the manipulation and abuse Sandy would do. Sandy came into Country Mart after Lena disappeared once while I was there, and I went up to ask her where Lena was, and she ran out the front door the moment she saw me. Lena's whereabouts were in limbo for almost 3 years until her biological father, Robert Chapin, in Arkansas, alerted Sheriff Epperly about her disappearance. The sheriff personally worked with Lena's father to file a report in Barry County in November of 2008. After hearing about yet another disappearance in the family, Albert says he became so frustrated that he and some friends made the 3-hour drive to Salem to put up missing person signs for Lena. Quote, I don't think they were up but for a couple of days, Albert said. He goes on to say, quote, Sandy was going around taking them down just as fast as we could put them up. Brandy said that she was also putting up missing flyers and caught one of her younger sisters taking one down. When she confronted the little sister said that Sandy was paying the girls that still lived with her or near her to take them down because, quote, Lena is not missing. She is in Florida, end quote.
Not suspicious.
Not suspicious at all. Now, the Salem News asked the Dent County Sheriff's Office on why a missing persons report was not filed on Lena in their county. In a written statement, they stated that they didn't open a case on Lena's disappearance until March of 2012. Quote, we were not informed of her disappearance at the time, said Detective Rick Letchworth of the sheriff's office. Quote, "It's strange that no one from her family reached out to alert us that she was missing." Detective Letchworth says that Sandy and Chris have continuously refused to cooperate with the investigation into finding Lena. Neither party, in fact, has been willing to speak to Detective Letchworth.
And for some reason, they chose not to appear on the episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, I mean, and from everything else I've seen, they've refused to appear just about anywhere. Detective Letchworth said that we are investigating this as a missing person case, but with suspicious circumstances. Brandy says one reason for the delayed reporting by the family was due to the rumors that Sandy was telling everybody that Lena was in Florida. Quote, "Mom started saying that Lena was a prostitute and she ran off to sell herself for drugs." Lena's friend Rachel Bryce stated, quote, "It's so unfair that Sandy can just say Lena was into drugs as if that's the reason why she disappeared. Lena only started using drugs because of her mom. Lena was partying too hard because she was traumatized from what her mom made her do to clean up the murder. I know because Lena told me. She confessed her mom killed her stepdad and made her clean it up. It was no secret, and it really ate at Lena. She'd bring it up, and we'd be drinking together. She would always open up when she was abusing herself most. I have no doubt that Lena's troubles are to blame on her mom manipulating her into covering up for that murder." Wow.
That's pretty wild.
I mean, that's what, 3-4 confessions now? The boy that lived near him. She's got 2 friends, and she told her sister, and she told Albert. That's 5 times she's told the story.
It just don't make sense to make it up. I mean, honestly, you gonna tell 5? You gonna lie to 5 people about a murder?
And
oh man,
Rachel Bryce would go on to say that outright fear of Sandy has been an ongoing factor in the case. Quote, "Everyone is scared of Sandy. That's why they don't want to say anything. There are people right now who know the truth, but they are staying quiet because they are scared." End quote. One of the only leads in the case of Lena's disappearance came when Detective Letchworth interviewed her former boyfriend, Jason Bryant, in 2012. Detective says that Jason and Lena were living together in an apartment outside Steelville immediately before her disappearance. They planned on getting married. The last time Jason says he saw Lena was February 14th, 2006. That was Valentine's Day. That morning, Jason told Detective Letchworth he woke up early, gave Lena a kiss. He gave her a kiss.
He gave her one of them marquises.
On the cheeks.
Yep.
And left saying he'd be back that evening. When Jason returned from work later that day, he instead found Sandy and 2 other people clearing all of Lena's belongings from the apartment. Sandy then tells Jason that Lena ran off with another man to Florida and then left with all of Lena's stuff. Jason says he never saw Lena again. Now, Detective Letchworth says, quote, "I believe Jason's story. He doesn't have any reason to lie. If he was guilty of something, I don't think he'd come down here to talk to me," end quote.
I certainly wouldn't.
Hell to the no. The owner of the apartment that Jason and Lena were renting confirmed that Sandy removed Lena's possessions from the unit Valentine's Day 2006, saying her daughter moved to Florida with a boyfriend. Quote, "When it was happening, I had no reason to not believe Sandy," the apartment owner told the Salem News. Quote, "She said her daughter moved to Florida. I thought she was telling the truth," end quote. The owner goes on to state that, quote, "I was cleaning the unit with a friend of mine after they left when we found a stain. I said to my friend, 'What did they do? Kill a dog in here?'" He goes on to state that the unit's carpets had to be replaced due to a large dark-colored stain that could not be shampooed out. One of the apartment windows was also broken.
Not suspicious at all.
A report from the Crawford County Sheriff's Office obtained by the Salem News confirms the owner reported the broken window as property damage on March 18th of 2006. The report indicates that Jason had vacated the apartment several weeks prior, which would be around the time of Lena's disappearance. The apartment owner says they did not contact law enforcement at the time because Lena had not been reported missing and foul play was not suspected. He goes on to say that the carpet was thrown away and Later, a fire in the building from a renter's smoking in bed subsequently destroyed the entire apartment complex. It came as a shock, the owner said, upon hearing from investigators years later that Lena was missing. Quote, "It was like my whole brain exploded. If I would have known, I would have kept all that evidence. But after so many years go by and after all the building burns down, there's just not anything left." Dent County law enforcement says that the apartment owner was interviewed after Lena was reported missing, and at the time, he did not make mention of any suspicious stains on the carpet. So he's either trying to get his 15 minutes fame or somebody lying. Now, Chris and Sandy began moving to a new home in Dent County 1 month after Jason claims Lena disappeared, according to documents obtained from the Dent County Records Office. The same week, Jason says Lena went missing. Chris and Sandy bought from Chris's parents the Sligo home and land parcel on which they'd been living on. 1 month later, March 15, 2006, the couple then purchased and subsequently moved to an 80-acre ranch on Dent County Road 3260. 4 months later, on June 9th, they sold their Sligo home. It's unlikely that someone who had as much interaction with law enforcement as Lena moved someplace and suddenly never got into trouble. To think that a young life can just vanish and nobody cares enough to report it for 3 years, it's even sadder that a mother can just allow it to happen, said Detective Letchworth. The search for Lena has proved fruitless. According to the Dent County Sheriff's Office, no one has claimed to have seen Lena since she was reported missing. She has not had any law enforcement contacts, and her Social Security number has likewise not been used. Nikki Gouffre said, quote, "I didn't know Lena was missing until I saw her face on a missing person flyer. It's heartbreaking. Lena never even got a funeral. There was no memorial or anything to prove she was here. It's like she'd never existed." Nikki is a friend and former co-worker of Lena's. On July 25th, 2013, a Stone County jury voted unanimously at the conclusion of a 4-day trial in Galena that Sandy and Chris Klemp knowingly took Gary McCullough's life. The case was moved from Barry County after the judge granted a change of venue. The McCullough daughters were awarded a total of $7 million.
And how much of that have they gotten?
Not a dime or a penny.
Not a single dime.
Sandy and Chris were ordered to pay $1 million collectively for taking Gary's life and $3 million each in punitive damages for the outrageous nature of the crime. Despite the lack of Lena's testimony and not hearing her taped confession played in court, it took the jury less than an hour to determine that there was enough evidence to find for the McCulloughs. More than 20 witnesses testified. Among them was Lena's sister, Brandy, who decided to come forward with Lena's confession to her. Brandy also testified about what Chris and Sandy had done to her with the pickup truck incident. Pretty damning evidence, if you do say so. Quote, "The way I look at it, my sister didn't choose to do what she did to help my mom," Brandy said. "She didn't choose to hold a secret for so long and then disappear. It's not fair my mom gets to live her life smiling. Testifying was the right thing to do. It was my only option."
It's just insane that, how are there not any criminal charges?
Dude, I have no idea.
That's the true mystery, is how is this allowed to happen?
When people say you can't commit the perfect murder, they need to go ask some folks that we've just talked about, see if they can give them any pointers. Another of Lena's sister, Robin Chapin, testified as well. She told the jury she witnessed Chris driving from an area adjacent to the burn pile the day Gary disappeared. She also said she saw Sandy and Chris the next day dragging something long and heavy, which wasn't furniture, out of the farmhouse. Now, both sisters testified they saw Gary's truck parked on the family's ranch on the evening of May 11, 1999, after Sandy had already said he had left town for Diamond. In his closing statement, plaintiff attorney Richard Lee Anderson addressed the lack of physical evidence in the case of Gary's disappearance by pointing out no formal forensics were recovered from the McCullough home. Quote, Gary McCullough lived in that house for 3 years and not one hair and none of his DNA was found in there. You have to be kidding me. End quote. So not surprising was that reporters covering the trial noted that neither Chris nor Sandy was in attendance during any day of the court proceedings. I thought if your ass was being sued, you had to show up, but I guess not in the great state of Missouri. Despite winning the civil trial, the McCullough's attorney, Anderson, believes there's unfinished business. Quote, I think it helps for it to be publicly known these people did this. The jury of 12 citizens didn't need a body to know the truth that Gary McCullough was murdered. I think it was positive we obtained that unanimous verdict, but I know the family will not have any real justice until their criminal charges filed in this case. End quote. Sheriff Epperly says he has not given up on the case against Sandy and Chris. He says he is currently working with Highway Patrol investigators to explore what options are available for prosecution and is hopeful they will have something to present to the state attorney general's office soon. Quote, I've been sheriff here going on 20 years, and we've solved many murder cases since I've been here, but this is a case that keeps me up at night. I go to bed still thinking about it. I did then, and I still do. I can only imagine how the family feels. Albert McCullough agrees with Sheriff Epperly and said that he thinks his family has waited long enough. Quote, I want something done about this, and I want it done soon. My mom is 79 years old, and she doesn't have much longer she can wait to get justice. This whole deal has broken my family. My dad died because of this. He had a heart attack and died after Gary went missing. My cousin Robert McCullough died too after he started popping pills after all this happened and got in a bad wreck. He and Gary were very close, end quote. Dent County officials say they're also not giving up on solving the mystery of what happened to Lena. Quote, this case has been on my radar since 2014. To date, law enforcement has not developed probable cause to believe her death was the result of a homicide in Dent County. We will continue to investigate this matter and urge people with any information to come forward. We want to resolve this case and find out the truth. No family deserves to suffer in this manner, and we need your help. That is prosecuting attorney Andrew Curley. Now, the next bit of information may come as a shock, but Sandy and Chris got a divorce in November of 2014.
I mean, it didn't last.
I know, man. I didn't see that one coming, to be honest. I mean, that one kind of hit me out of left field.
Jeez.
We just can't count on
They
nothing.
can't make it. There's no hope for any of them.
No, I might as well just go ahead and divorce my wife. Chris still owns the 80-acre ranch on Dent County Road 3260, but is trying to sell the property. Sandy, another shocker, has remarried and lives in Mount Vernon with her new husband, Joe Wink. And that's only I Google mapped it. That's about 48 minutes from where Gary disappeared. She is currently raising Lena's son, Coulter, as her own. Lena's sister, Brandy, said, quote, I can't believe I lived it. My hope for the future is to have closure and that Mom goes to prison. The last time I spoke with her was about 7 years ago. She called me and said my boyfriend and I should come to Christmas so everyone could be together. I told her I would go when Lena came home too, and then I said, never call me again, bitch, and I hung up.
Wow.
Yeah. Despite the efforts of multiple law enforcement agencies, journalists, and attorneys over the past 10-plus years, the case of Lena Chapin's disappearance continues to be as muddied and mysterious as that of Gary McCullough's. Quote, someone knows what happened to Gary, and someone else must know what happened to Lena, Albert said. He goes on to state, I've been a farmer my whole life. I've had to burn a calf on a brush pile before, and I know the big bones don't burn up into ash. Gary's bones are out there somewhere. Someone knows where those bones are. Lena said they weren't there when her mom and her picked through the ashes. That means someone moved them before they got there. And that's probably the same person who stoked that fire all night while Lena was sleeping, end quote. Now, as has been duly noted throughout this episode, my co-host is going to recommend the Netflix Unsolved Mysteries episode number 6. But there's controversy concerning said episode. I didn't know this, but what they did in each one of those episodes for Netflix is they make a Google Drive folder of everything they collect. All the cutting room drops, edits, all that stuff is put into a Google Drive. And they turn that Google Drive over to the authorities for each one of those cases, which is pretty damn smart. But the controversy from that episode stems from an unreleased clip, and it states that investigator Brian Martin is unsure how legit Lena's story to Albert was. Quote, something that was interesting when he did find Gary's truck was there was one place to sit, and that was the driver's seat. You could sit on the passenger side, but you couldn't put your feet on the floor as there was so much litter. I found it ironic because in the one interview I did get with Lena, she said that on the night Gary left, she rode with him in the truck, but didn't want to be seen with him, and she sat on the floor of the truck. I commented to the other investigators that were there, quote, nobody has sat on that floor for a long time, end quote. Brandy would comment on a Reddit thread after the episode aired stating that, quote, let me correct some things. Also, the bloodstain in her apartment was not that of a murder that was committed, but a miscarriage my sister had less than a year prior to her disappearance. I'm not going to say nothing else. But anyway, Redditor Papa Echo Nova Indy Sierra claims McCullough was their uncle and Lena was their cousin, shared more about Lena's disappearance. Quote, the apartment where Lena lived when she disappeared, Sandy randomly showed up there the day Lena disappeared, told Lena's boyfriend that she had run off with another man and left her kid behind. Soon after she ran off to Florida, the landlord did complete renovations due to bloodstains on the carpet. The landlord was quoted as saying, like we said, it looked like a dog had been chopped up because the carpet was pulled up. A giant bloodstain was found on the wood below the carpet as well as in the carpet itself. He says that he doesn't know anything about the disappearance, and all he knew is that Lena, quote, moved away. To make things even more interesting, this guy, the cousin, does not believe that the old boy smoking in the upstairs unit was by accident and that someone torched the entire complex. That someone might be of the female's persuasion if one is to hypothesize about such things that occur in this case. And I don't want to get into this, but I guess I have to. And we did have a listener out there, hopefully she's still out there, that could read forensic pathology stuff. And she contacted us about one of the autopsies that we read from, that we had questions from. And I apologize, we don't know your name, but
how can you forget her, man?
Well, you're not about to spit it out either, so I don't want to hear it.
Well, that's not the point.
My question is to any of our listeners, and this is disgusting, so if you have kids in the car, I'm going to give you about 2 seconds to turn this thing off. I want to know if a miscarriage could be mistaken for that amount of blood seeping through and staining a wood floor through the carpet. All right, so back to it. Detective Rick Letchworth of the Dent County Sheriff's Office asks anyone with pertinent information concerning Lena Chapin's disappearance to contact the office at 573-729-3241. The McCullough family is offering a reward for information that leads to the arrest for the murder of Gary McCullough. Information can be given to the Barry County Sheriff's Department at 417-847-6556. Sheriff Epperly has since retired, so there is a new sheriff in Barry County.
Man, you had a great opportunity to say there's a new sheriff in town. Come on.
Well, I missed it.
Come on, man. It's clearly the line.
I missed it. I could pull out the Roadhouse quote. That hurts like a son of a bitch, don't it? All right. So that, ladies and gentlemen, was the convoluted story about a young lady that went missing. And to tell her story, we had to talk about another disappearance and a 99.9% chance that man was murdered, allegedly.
I mean, I couldn't, like I said, we just can't prove it, Bruce. Like, I mean, come on. it couldn't be more obvious. But like I said earlier, the real mystery is how there's no criminal charges have been filed. At least investigate.
I think they have. I think I go back to what Sheriff Epperly said. They know who did it. They just don't have that one piece of evidence to tell them to it. That whole police department, 3 counties, there's 3 county sheriff's departments that would love to slap some bracelets on her. The thing is, I don't think, listening to the confession tape, I know Albert presses Lena a couple of times on where the burn pile was at, but with him living an hour away, and then Lena confessing, 4 years after the fact, most of that is going to be burned up.
Yeah, the evidence got to be gone by now.
There's some weird shit that Sandy says to Brandy and Robin, the 2 daughters that are featured in Coach's recommendation, about a dog being buried on her new property and shit like that. So please do watch that. But there's not really anything for y'all to let us know about except for my hypothetical situation. All right, so Coach's recommendation. Did you like to tell the people?
The Unsolved Mysteries episode 6 on Lena Chapin, called The Missing Witness.
It is very good. Well, all of them are very good.
Hey, that thing's coming back out. But instead of 6 episodes this season, there's going to be 9. And they're going to premiere 3 weeks in a row, 3 episodes a week.
Damn. When's that start?
It starts October 18th.
Well, I have to renew my membership to that satanic cult thing called Netflix just to watch that.
A satanic cult. Good God, I don't know where you're getting your news, but all right.
I'm just making it up off the cuff, to be honest with you.
I can tell.
Well, my recommendation is you don't fall your ass down and fuck your back up. So if you're over the age of 45, make your kids do your yard work. That's my recommendation. All right, Coach, you got anything else?
You know I don't.
Deuces.